Father, we thank you for this time and this moment that we have together, and it's a crucial moment. In the next few minutes, lives could actually be directed and changed and head in a new direction. Things that were going upside down could be turned right side up. And so we thank you for this moment that we have together, and I pray, Holy Spirit, that truly we just hear your voice, each and every one of us. We just totally depend on you, but we're excited about this time in our process right here today. Amen. God reveals himself to those who believe, not to those who doubt. And it's funny because those that doubt, they like to really put out there all kinds of sarcasm and all kinds of, junk and say God's dead and God's not around, what a bunch of stupid stuff. But then they can't see him, because that's what it takes. It takes faith. It takes faith to believe in him. But when you do see him and believe in him, it really is awesome. We've been talking about selective hearing. We've been talking about the ability to hear God. And, whether you're really super on fire about that or not, God is, even though you may be in doubt, he is still always working with the doubters, trying to get them persuaded. He's always trying to get seeds into people and thoughts into people, no matter where they're at in life. He doesn't stop sowing. It's not like he's trying to not show himself. He's just that he's revealing himself. But if you got doubts, you've got selective hearing. You're not going to be able to hear him. But he keeps speaking, and he keeps working, and he loves the process because he knows the outcome of it all. But when you start opening up, then he can, and believing, then he can really start showing himself. So we've been talking about a lot of things. I won't review all that. I really encourage you to go back and listen to them. They're really building on each other. But in this particular scripture, it's something that a long time ago the Lord showed with me. He says, when you're willing, or you make your will, when the word willing there can be translated exercise one's will or choose. When you choose to say, I'm going to obey God, long before you even hear him, long before you know what he's going to say, but when you say, I trust him and I'm going to obey him, and I make a decision to do that, then he's able to really start communicating a lot more to you. We talked about, how God said in the Old Testament in Deuteronomy, you choose, I set before you life and death. You choose. But when you read that in context, here's how you choose. If you want to choose life, you choose it by listening to God's instructions and obeying it. That's how you choose. You don't just say, I choose life. I mean, you say that, but there is an action, a corresponding action. And that means you actually do hear what his instructions say, and then you do act on them. And then he said, then you can choose life, and then you can choose blessings. If you don't choose to obey him, then the default choice is not life, it's death. How critical is it for us to make the decision? To say, I will obey him. When you hear the words, I can't, I won't, I'm not able to, literally, when those come out of your mouth, what you're basically saying is, I've made a decision to not live. I've made a decision to not make it. I've made a decision to choose something besides life. Because when you choose life, then you say, I choose to do it. I choose to step into it and to do it. So in our book, we're going through the book Awaken the Giant Within with the men. I've just been so blessed in our men's meeting personally, and through that book and then this one, and just the men's lives. But I want to read to you out of it a portion. And it was this last chapter we went through was about the power of the decisions, the pathway to power. And it so stirred up things inside of me again. Some of the old TNC teaching, a lot of things. And then I got on, and Jim Richards was talking about, he had a series on decision making, and it just seemed like the Spirit of God was saying, this is where I want you to go with this. So let me read you this. This is a quote, first of all. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. Boy, the testimonies of people that have been down and out or wherever they're at and they want to go farther, but they make a conscious endeavor to do so. And then this next paragraph goes on to say this. Too many of us don't make the majority of our decisions consciously, especially these three absolute crucial ones. And then what he's referring to there is, what do you focus on? What do things mean to you? And what do you do? Especially that first one, what do you focus on? He said, in so doing, we pay a major price. In fact, most people live what I call the Niagara syndrome. I believe that life is like a river, and that most people jump on the river of life without ever really deciding where they wanted to end up. So in a short period of time, they get caught up in the current events, current fears, current challenges. When they come to forks in the river, they don't consciously decide where they want to go or which is the right direction for them. They merely go with the flow. Now, people literally say that. I'm just going with the flow. I'm going to see what happens. I guess we'll just find out. They become a part of the mass of people who are directed by the environment instead of by their own values. As a result, they feel out of control. They remain in this unconscious state until one day the sound of the raging water awakens them, and they discover they're 5 feet from Niagara Falls in a boat with no oars. At this point, they say, "Oh, shoot," or something else. But then it's too late. They're going to take a fall. Sometimes it's an emotional fall. Sometimes it's a physical fall. Sometimes it's a financial fall. It's likely that whatever challenges you have in your life currently could have been avoided by some better decisions upstream. Now, you can take that, and I can take that and be condemned, or we can take that and be encouraged and say, you know something, I'm going to start making a lot more conscious endeavor of where I want to go. Way too many of us can just look at the current events and say, you know, this is where the world's going. Oh my, what a trouble it is. But I just want to minister to you that to hear God is going to be success for you, for me. Nobody knows more about you than God. Nobody knows the way more than God. Nobody loves you more than God. Nobody has the power or the resources that you need. As Jody said, man, we've got to be very careful that we don't just all try to hear the same thing. God is talking to each one of us individually. But each one of us do have to make a quality decision to obey that voice. First of all, to hear it, and second of all, to fulfill it. How important is our decision? You know, Jesus, and the Word of God referred to this body so often to help us to understand the body of Christ and our life. But if you just think with me just for a moment, one solid decision can affect every vital sign that you have in your body. With one decision, you can change your temperature, your heart rate, your oxygen consumption, your hormone level, your brain activity, all move and change the moment you decide to act and to go forward, or you decide to quit. Literally, you can change your whole body chemistry. You know, they sometimes say, you have hormone deficiencies causing depression, and I understand that. That's true. But your body produces all that, and your willpower to make a decision so often, especially one that just says, I will, and I am, and then you start acting on it, will literally start changing your body, its chemistry and everything else. That's how powerful it is. No decision is always a decision for failure. It's always a decision for fear. It's always a decision for death, to make no decision. Boy, I look back on my life, and the days I was, when I start saying, I'm going to take charge of John Williamson. One of the first times was when I was in 7th grade and I got sent to the principal's office, and it was not because I was doing something wrong. I was in the study hall. And this older kid was helping me with my math, but the teacher had an issue with him and thought that he was using me to get to her. And so she scolded me to get to him, because I was a real shy, innocent boy at 7th grade. And so she said, go to the principal and get a signature. Well, I had to walk clear across to the schoolyard. We were in a new school. I went from Vale to Newell. I was intimidated already, but then, and the principal was teaching the Ag boys. Now, when you're in 7th grade and all the Ag boys, they're big, they're tough, and here's a principal in front of them, and I got to take this piece of paper and have him sign it. That's all I had to do. Man, I was so scared, so intimidated, I cried all the way to that big white building in Newell, South Dakota. I couldn't control it, and I walked in there in tears, and I'm shaking. I've never been in trouble before. Handed that, and mercy, you can say what you want to the big boys, I don't know. I didn't look at them real close, but they were holding back every laughter they could. They actually looked kind of sympathetic as far as I remember. I never thought of them being mean to me. They might have been, but I didn't take it that way. And the principal looked at me and just said, it's okay, John, it's okay. Not a problem, you know. Man, and I walked out of there, and I didn't feel slighted. I didn't feel any of that, but I felt humiliated. And I remember as I walked back to the other building, I said, that will never happen again. And it didn't. In fact, by the time I graduated from high school in Sturgis here, I was on the other side of the picture. Kind of like, send me to the principal's office. Anyway, I won't go there. Decisions can change everything. Okay? But just saying I can't, just saying, oh, poor old me, it actually literally takes everything. And here's who came up with it, God did. Now in Romans 8:34, it says, who is the one who condemns? Christ Jesus is he who died. Yes. Say yes. And then say rather. That's an interesting word there. Yes, rather who was raised. Oh, wait a minute. He died. But rather who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who also intercedes for us. One of the things that really encouraged me when Tony Robbins just said, listen, to get more skillful at making decisions, one of the things you got to do is make more decisions. Make more decisions. Make more decisions. Well, what if I mess up? You are going to mess up. There ain't no doubt about it. You're going to make mistakes. Make more decisions. I don't know about you, but one of the things I share with the guys is that, we've laughed about it here in the church, but, when we leave church afterwards, a lot of times it's like, where shall we go eat? I don't know. You decide. No, I don't do it. Well, let's go to Taco John's. No, not Taco John's. I don't care where we go, but not Taco John's. Okay, we'll go to Burger King. No, I don't know about Burger King. Well, where do you want to go? Oh, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, it's like torture. It's like the worst part about Sunday. In so many other areas. And for me, I feel like at times I make a lot of big, important decisions. I walk into a hospital room when somebody's dying, and I just start taking charge. I'll make the decision. I'll make calls that are literally sometimes life and death issues. But don't ask me where I want to go eat. Okay? Don't ask me to plan out the weekend. And for years I've just said, Lisa, why don't you do all that? And I'll follow you. And if it's, I'm more flexible than you are anyway. Boy, that went over bad. No, she's not here. But she always said, I want you to decide, And I've been reluctant because when I do decide, usually it's like, no, not there. Well, then why am I deciding? But in that little office, I made a decision last Wednesday night to say, that's over with. Just like I said, that's over with crying going to the principal's office. That's it. I'm making decisions. I'm going to be flexible, but I'm going to make the call. Because when I just read that, if you want to become skilled at decision making, you've got to make a lot more decisions. And see, when life hammers you off and on all the way through your life, after a while, you just get bombarded enough where you're like that little flea that hits his head on the lid, and all of a sudden the lid's taken off, and you don't want to jump high no more because you don't want to hit your little bitty head no more. But see, if you're going to choose life, you got to choose to hear God. If you're going to choose to hear God, you got to choose. That means you choose to obey Him. And then what it means to obey Him, you got to make a decision to act on what He tells you. You got to say, now's the time. I'm doing it now. And you go after it. And the more you do that, the more skilled you get. And so I just want to say, somebody said, well, how long is it going to take? When I went to Marjorie May, February 6th last year, and she said to me, you're a very sick man, and you're in very much trouble physically, and if you don't do something you've never done before, if you don't make a decision right now, John, says you're going to end up in major trouble not too long from now. I think when Mike had his heart attack last week, I think it really hit me hard, besides the fact that I didn't want to lose him. So grateful he's alive today. But I think it hit me inside my heart that more and more, I believed her, but I didn't know how much I believed her. I believed her, but I thought, I'm still not that bad a shape. But as this year has gone by, I'm more convinced than ever that I may not be here today if I hadn't listened to what she said. I'm not so sure that I would be here standing before you today. I think I was in that much trouble. And I know if I definitely didn't make any changes, I wouldn't be here in a few years. Jesus died to forgive us of our sins, but it's even as, how do you say that? Rather. But it wasn't just his death that got us victory, it's his resurrection. It's him being alive. He now lives for us. He now lives to make intercession. He's now up there talking to the Father about us. Isn't that interesting? That Jesus himself is sitting praying for us right now. He's alive right now to help us. And you know something? I'm grateful that Mike's alive, because dead, it would have had a huge impact on us, and some of us would have stepped up the plate even more. But having him live gives him another 40 years to impact people. You're way more valuable alive than dead. But how long, when I asked May, how long is it going to take me to get this straightened out in my body? She said, well, probably 3 months. She lied. I talked to her about it just the other day, and all she would do is smile. I said, well, what if I told you it was going to take this long? Would you have done it? I said, yes, I would have, because I made the decision. But I appreciate you giving me some encouragement and lying to me. It'll take 3 months, and it's going to take 3 years. Some of you say, how long is it going to take? Part of it depends. How many decisions you're going to make? You're going to make one decision to drink more water every day? Or are you going to make 10 decisions to do this, 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 and this? Or are you going to make 20 decisions to do this, 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 this? Or are you going to take, how many decisions are you going to make to obey God? That's going to determine how fast you grow. Doesn't that make sense? So I'm speaking to somebody today that decided to hear. I'm going to read this because I wrote it after a time of meditation last night, so I'm just going to read it. I'm speaking to a person who is persuaded that their purpose is to partake of the nature of God. It may be one of you. It may not be any of you. Or it could be all of you. I'm speaking to one. You have, or soon will, make the most life-changing, life-giving decisions you can ever make. Your perspective is that Christ dying for you was the beginning of his gift to you, and his resurrection, his life now, is the fulfillment of his promise of love. Yes, some have died to love God's people. Some have jumped on grenades, stepped in front of bullets. Some have died on the mission field. But you believe and have decided to focus on living, to love his children, and to help fulfill his desire and his will that all mankind be saved. I'm talking to somebody today. I'm talking to somebody today that either has or is this close to making that decision like never before. That says, I will live to help fulfill my Father's plan to reach out and save mankind. You're not jumping in the river just to see where it takes you. You're getting in the river with deliberate choice of where you're going to go. Some have lost very much obeying Christ. As they obeyed his instructions to love one another, they have jumped on grenades. They have lost fortunes. They've laid their life down. They've been martyred. And to partake of Christ's love for mankind. But today I believe that from heaven an appeal has come forth. I believe God is speaking today and saying, who will live for us? Who will live for us? Who will live out of their days on a solid, who will live out their days on a solid decision to stay alive and to focus, hear that word, focus on hearing God, becoming skilled and having a mastery in being led by the Spirit of God, moment by moment, to execute his whisper or shouts of direction for the benefit of his kingdom in the hearts and souls of mankind. Christ ever liveth to make intercession. In Hebrews 7:25, it speaks of this again, that he ever liveth to make intercession. You and I can join him. And to this person that I'm speaking to, again, maybe it's none of you, maybe it's somebody on the website, maybe it's all of you. This decision is to be in sync, to be in tune, to be congruent with the heart of the Trinity. Who will make the call? Who will make the decision and say, I will. I'm in. God's nature is what you and I really want to partake of. You know, there's a lot of goals we can have. We can be farmers, we can be carpenters, we can raise families, all that. And all that can stay in place, that can enhance. In fact, it will enhance. But I'm talking about a core, solid belief deep down inside that says my existence on earth is for this purpose, that I partake of the nature of God. And for me to partake of the nature of God means I must hear his voice and his instructions, and I begin to execute it promptly and properly. And so here's the nature of God. God says, I am who I am. And way back in the garden, he says, I will. Satan, I will crush your head. And I will save my people. And I do. And right then, he started the process of bringing Christ into the earth. Right then, right there, God made a decision. And then he says, I have given everything. All things are given to you. He's already done it. Everything pertaining to life and godliness has been granted unto you through the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And now if you and I are going to partake of his nature, then we say the same thing. I'm alive. I will, focused on hearing his voice and doing his, and I do it, and I have, and I will continue. So to that person that I'm speaking to today, step up to the plate. Make the decision. Choose to hear him, obey him. You know, people say, well, I just don't know what he's asking me. Well, let me tell you what he's asking you. Before you try to figure out who you're going to marry, where you're going to go, what job you're going to take, those will all come. But can I say, those are not really the important thing to make the decision on today. The important thing to say is, I will hear him. Well, what if you fail? You will fail. How many times will I fail? It depends on how many times you make the decision. How long till I get better? It depends on how many decisions you make per day. You'll learn from every one of them. You'll learn when you do it wrong, and you'll learn what you do right. The more you do it, the better, more skilled you're going to be at it. But you're not going to get skilled if you don't make a decision right now, today, and say, I'm in. You know, we texted during the lunch hour, about 4 or 5 of us in racquetball. Who's playing today? Bam! I'm in! And boy, you better show up when you say that. Or you better have a good excuse. I'm just saying, all you got to do is say, I'm in. I want to hear and obey my Lord. And the first thing he said, love God with all your heart, respect him and honor him, and then love everybody else. Those two right there will pretty much take everything. If you get those down, the rest is all done. Seriously. Your retirement, what you're going to do, where you're going to go, your health, everything else can come into order pretty easy. Isn't that what Jesus said? If you will get this down first and perfect. And by perfect, that doesn't mean without mistakes. In fact, one of the things you have to make a decision is I don't care how many times I fail. I don't care how many times I fail. I'm in. I'm not coming out. With my last breath, I'm in. Now think about this. I'm not talking about changing your occupation. I'm talking about each one of us right where you're at right now. Right where you're at right now, and all the relationships you got, all the financial things you got right now, just saying, God, I'm into listening to you and obeying you. Because you know some of the greatest moments ahead of you are just the moments in a grocery store when you feel led to maybe pay for the person's groceries right there and just speak a word and say, better days are coming, honey. That's what I'm not talking about going to the mission field. I'm not talking about entering the ministry. I'm talking about you and me being led by the Spirit of God every day, and the things that we say, the people that we text, the prayers that we pray. Marty, would you come? I'm going to ask my brother to share with you a story in closing that has highly impacted him and I, about a man who made a decision and what the outcome was. But heaven today, this is not just a sermon again. Heaven today, from heaven, the Trinity is speaking today and saying, who will live for us? Who will live for us?
I'm probably that one man he's speaking to today. 12 years ago or so, I gave up on life, the Christian life, and moved to Nisla and figured that was as... Last Sunday, a lady said she moved to someplace in Alaska that was 300 miles north. It's like, you don't need to go that far to be alone. And then I started babysitting my grandson, Jess, and I realized that there was still some purpose left in life for me. And I made a decision some 10, 11 years ago that I would pick up my sword and battle on. And Jess is every time I see that boy, he's a reminder of that decision to press on. Actually, I gave this book away several months ago, and there was something in it I wanted to read this week, so I asked to get it back. Very interesting. I got it back, I think, on Wednesday, and then John texted me this morning to read a portion out of it. It's from the book, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And she quotes in there from another book that George Ritchie wrote, Return from Tomorrow. When the war in Europe ended in May 1945, the 123rd evac entered Germany with the occupying troops. I was part of a group assigned to a concentration camp near Wuppertal, charged with getting medical help to the newly liberated prisoners, many of them Jews from Holland, France, and Eastern Europe. This was the most shattering experience I'd had yet. I'd been exposed many times by then to sudden death and injury, but to see the effect of slow starvation, to walk through barracks where thousands of men had died a little bit at a time over a period of years, was a new kind of horror. For many, it was an irreversible process. We lost scores each day in spite of all the medicine and food we could rush to them. And that's how I came to know Wild Bill Cody. That wasn't his real name. His real name was 7 unpronounceable syllables in Polish. But he had long, drooping handlebar mustaches like pictures of the old Western hero, so the American soldiers called him Wild Bill. He was one of the inmates of the concentration camp, but obviously he hadn't been there long. His posture was erect, his eyes bright, his energy indefatigable. Since he was fluent in English, French, German, and Russian, as well as Polish, he became the kind of unofficial camp translator. We came to him with all sorts of problems. The paperwork alone was staggering in attempting to relocate people whose families, even whole hometowns, might have disappeared. But though Wild Bill worked 15 and 16 hours a day, he showed no signs of weariness. While the rest of us were drooping with fatigue, he seemed to gain strength. "We have time for this old fellow," he'd say. "He's been waiting to see us all day." His compassion for his fellow prisoners glowed on his face, and it was this glow that I came to when my own spirits were low. So I was astonished to learn when Wild Bill's own papers came before us one day that he had been in Wuppertal since 1939. For 6 years, he had lived on the same starvation diet, slept in the same airless and disease-ridden barracks as everyone else, but without the least physical or mental deterioration. Perhaps even more amazing, every group in the camp looked on him as a friend. He was the one to whom quarrels between inmates were brought for arbitration. Only after I'd been at Wuppertal a number of weeks did I realize what a rarity this is in a compound where the different nationalities of prisoners hated each other almost as much as they did the Germans. As for the Germans, feelings against them ran so high that in some of the camps liberated earlier, former prisoners had seized guns, run into the nearest village, and simply shot the first Germans they saw. Part of our instructions were to prevent this kind of thing, and again, Wild Bill was our greatest asset, reasoning with the different groups, counseling forgiveness. "It's not easy for some of them to forgive," I commented to him one day as we sat over mugs of tea in the processing center. "So many of them have lost members of their families." Wild Bill leaned back in the upright chair and sipped at his drink. "We lived in the Jewish section of Warsaw," he began slowly, the first words I'd heard him speak about himself. "My wife, our 2 daughters, and our 3 little boys. When the Germans reached our street, they lined everyone up against a wall and opened up with machine guns. I begged to be allowed to die with my family, but because I spoke German, they put me in a work group. He paused, perhaps seeing again his wife and 5 children. He said, had to decide right then whether to let myself hate the soldiers who had done this. It was an easy decision, really. I was a lawyer. In my practice, I had seen too often what hate could do to people's minds and bodies. Hate had just killed the 6 people who mattered most to me in the world. I decided then that I would spend the rest of my life, whether it was a few days or many years, loving every person I came in contact with.
Well, not too many of us are going to have a story that beats that, are we? Would you stand with me, please? No, we don't know all that's going to happen in the world tomorrow or even today. But just to jump in the river and float down to see where it takes us, it's a guaranteed trip of death. Lack, bitterness, confusion, poverty. But no matter where you are today, or anybody else that you're going to get to talk to in your lifetime, the moment they make a decision, you make the decision to step into the river and say, this is where I'm going. I will love my God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might, with all my resources. I will respect and honor him. And when he whispers, who will live for us? I will step forward quickly, briskly, and confidently and declare what I believe most deeply in my heart. I will, Father. I will. Today, somebody is making that decision. And everything now is going to change. From your body, your heart, your thinking, your perspective, to every circumstance in your life. Your circumstances will no longer guide you and conform you. You will create your circumstances. I will, Father. I make the call for my life. Thank you for the invitation. Amen. Amen.